President Donald Trump is vowing to take action on gun control following the deadly shooting in Florida. Today, he directed the Attorney General to propose a ban on bump stocks. That device was used by the shooter in Las Vegas last October when he killed 58 people at a country music festival.
After the deadly shooting in Las Vegas, I directed Attorney General to clarify whether certain bump stock devices, like the one used in Las Vegas, are illegal under current law. That process began in December, and just a few moments ago, I signed a memorandum directing the Attorney General to propose regulations to ban all devices that turn legal weapons into machine guns. I expect that these critical regulations will be finalized, Jeff, very soon.
Joining me now from the White House is Associated Press White House reporter and CBSN political contributor Zeke Miller. Hi, Zeke. Banning bump stocks initially had bipartisan support but went nowhere. So this is not the first time we're hearing about a ban of bump stocks. Does the president's announcement today change things?
Certainly it could. We don't know exactly what this memorandum does, what the Department of Justice and the ATF will actually formulate and what they will put forward as regulation here when it comes to bump stocks. It's very unlikely that anything they would propose would sort of see a sort of bump stocks to sort of come off the street, that if there are enough of them have been sold, that they could be traded in secondary markets and things like that, that they could be potentially used. But that said, all of this is a little bit of an aside here. Bump stocks were used in that Las Vegas massacre, but by and large are not used in most mass shootings that were not used in Parkland, Florida last week. They are sort of common among hobbyists more than anything else, not so much mass shooters. At Las Vegas, the Las Vegas massacre being the glaring exception there. So it's one of those things where it took the administration a very long time to get to this point. We don't know exactly what this will do, but this is the president trying to send at least fire the signal flare that he is trying to take some serious steps to tackle the issue of gun violence and particularly mass shootings in general.
Right. And as you just pointed out, bump stocks were not used in the Florida massacre. And of course, you were in the press briefing today with Sarah Huckabee Sanders. What other gun control measures are on the table?
Well, Sarah Sanders wasn't ruling anything out today. So even when asked, would the president consider reinstating the assault weapons ban, which of course he supported back in 2000, back when he was a Democrat, essentially, and then turn around on when he was endorsed by the NRA as a presidential candidate, spoke at their convention last year. He had made an about face on that. Would he consider reversing course once again on assault weapons, assault-style weapons? Sarah Sanders, sort of wouldn't close the door on that. I'm told by White House officials that's not really in the cards at all. But that's the way the White House is trying to message things, that this is so soon after this horrendous tragedy. The president's looking sort of very seriously at a whole bunch of options. Really, that's not on the table. But the fact that they're not closing the door on it is a sign that they want to at least sort of publicly sort of signal that they want to work together with Democrats, work together with Republicans at Capitol Hill, and also stakeholders, local officials, and things like that to try to actually get something done.
All right. And Zeke, the president will also be holding listening sessions on school safety. He's meeting with students and teachers tomorrow. What more did we learn today about that process and what the president hopes to accomplish with the meeting?
Certainly, we've heard the president wants to make this a focus of the week. He's meeting with students, teachers, and parents tomorrow at the White House, then some other officials on Thursday again, and then he's meeting with the governors at the White House. He's hosting them on Sunday night for the traditional governors' ball, and then again from working meetings on Monday. He wants to discuss all of this. It's not clear, given that just as we just discussed, he doesn't have specific policy proposals yet that he wants to implement at the state level or the federal level, or they're still in that listening mode. So maybe he'll get some feedback that will inform some of those policies. But there's a critical moment after any sort of tragedy where you can galvanize public opinion to try to actually act and get something done. There doesn't seem to be a lot of sort of drive towards action right now. A lot of drive towards listening and being seen as listening, not so much getting making a lot of changes.
Yeah, good point, Zeke. Now, meanwhile, the president has been criticizing President Obama on Twitter after special counsel Robert Mueller's latest indictments in in the Russia investigation. But as was pointed out today during the press conference with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, he hasn't publicly criticized President Putin for election meddling. I want to play some of Sarah Huckabee Sanders' response when asked about that today.
The president has been extremely tough on Russia. He helped push through $700 billion to rebuild our military. I can assure you Russia is not excited about that. He's helped export energy to Eastern Europe. I can assure you Russia is not excited about that. He has put and upheld sanctions that the Obama administration put in place. He's upheld those. He's closed 3 diplomatic properties that were Russia's here in the United States. He has taken a number of actions against Russia and put pressure on them. He's helped arm the Ukrainians. There are a number of places that Obama was too weak and refused to take and put pressure on Russia where this president has.
So, Zeke, does the White House feel any pressure at all to be more outspoken about Russia?
It doesn't seem that way. I mean, it's certainly, Sarah Sanders is trying to talk tough here, accusing the president's predecessor, President Obama, of being weak, which sort of not sort of traditional language that you generally see presidents refer to the previous administrations that way. But there's a difference between the president putting out a statement that mentions Russia or upholding Obama administration actions and sort of using the power of the bully pulpit, using his own words in public fora to actually go out and criticize what Russia does. And in fact, when he come out and does that, whether it be on Twitter or other public statements, it's always, well, Russia hacks, China hacks, others hack. He raises questions about the Russian investigation rather than using it as an opportunity, using the indictment not as an opportunity. He used it as an opportunity to sort of say that his campaign had done nothing wrong, that it proved his campaign had done nothing wrong, which is an overstatement, rather than using it as an opportunity to sort of galvanize sort of the way the Deputy Attorney General came out and said the Russian government was engaged in information warfare against the United States, and actually use it as an opportunity to sort of center the conversation around that. He's not using it that way. And certainly when it comes to being tough on Russia, he had an opportunity to implement new sanctions on Russia just a few weeks ago, and his administration took a pass.
Right. I was going to ask you about that because, of course, you heard Sarah Huckabee Sanders say President Trump kept President Obama's sanctions against Russia. But as you pointed out, Congress passed new ones, which he hasn't acted on. So are we likely to see action on those in the future? I mean, I think a lot of Americans are concerned about what's going to happen in the next election cycle.
I think it's certainly possible that there are reporting deadlines for the Trump administration with under that congressional legislation, but there's not a lot of sort of urgency on the part of the White House or the Trump administration more broadly. It seems to do that. They had that opportunity. They passed up on it. That said, Sarah Sanders did sort of hint at something that happened last week that we'll find out that will be reported in the coming days that will indicate how yet another way how the Trump administration is being tough on Russia. We don't really know the details on that. White House officials haven't sort of elaborated yet. They said stay tuned, which is a favorite answer of this White House. So hopefully we'll get some more clarity on that in the coming days.
And lastly, there are reports that a number of White House officials do not have full security clearance, and one of those individuals is Jared Kushner. Now, you asked about that at the briefing. What's the controversy here, and what did you learn?
Well, John Kelly, the chief of staff, changed the White House policy in a memo on Friday following the Rob Porter scandal, where he said that if you work in the White House and you're operating under an interim security clearance, you have not been able to obtain a full permanent security clearance, and you've been in that interim window since June of last year, so the better part of a year, 9 months or so. By this coming Friday, you will lose your access to classified information. I asked Sarah, we know that Jared Kushner, and Jared Kushner's attorney says he doesn't have a permanent clearance, he has an interim clearance, but we know he has access to classified information under an interim one. Will that affect him? And Sarah says, no, it will not impact him. The big question is how. We don't know whether or not the president, she would not say if the president was going to sort of unilaterally give Jared Kushner a clearance around sort of the existing processes at the White House. We don't know if Kushner is going to get a clearance, a permanent clearance this week just before that deadline to sneak under the wire. Or maybe Jared Kushner's role at the White House has been so circumscribed, or there's some way for him to do his job without access to that top secret, sensitive, compartmentalized information that he's been granted to on an interim basis. That's one of those things, one of those storylines that we'll be following very closely as we get to Friday. Right.
A lot that we just don't know still. All right. Zeke Miller, thank you so much for that.
Thank you.